Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Thursday, May the 4th. Hello, I got it. All right, finally I remembered one of these holidays. It's May the 4th. It's Star Wars Day. I realized as I was writing up the morning post for today that, my usual practice is to set up a template by cutting and pasting the previous day's work and just changing the intros on the top, and that means that my big joke about remembering that May the 4th was coming on May the 3rd, but not being able to remember probably that on May the 4th, that it actually was May the 4th, and missing the big opportunity to say so, it put that right back in front of my face when I did have the opportunity to say so. So I did it, and now I've done it out loud, and it's not a big deal because it's not a real holiday, and nobody cares. And I haven't seen any of the latest entries in the Star Wars universe like for the past 10 years or more, possibly. So I don't know what the hell's going on. And I guess I no longer would be considered a a Star Wars fan. Certainly not the kind of person who would walk around saying, hey, it's Happy Star Wars Day, May the 4th be with you, because the 4th and all the things that go along with it kind of went out of my life a long time ago. Too bad. I was a big fan of Star Wars as a kid. You know, not like, hey, can I have Star Wars bed sheets kind of fan, but, you know, I was like, hey, that movie's pretty good, and I guess I would see it again, and I did, and then everything kind of went to hell, and I don't know. Maybe it was the ushering in of the modern special effects era. Maybe it was George Lucas's weird obsession with remaking the old movies too. I don't even enjoy rewatching the old ones very much when he's recut everything and all the interesting stuff has changed, or he puts, and when I started putting all the weird characters in, and hey, enough with the wacky aliens. I mean, obviously, most of what's going on here is among humanoid aliens, and just leave it with that, and you don't have to invent new colors of face every 5 seconds. The fact that it's gotten diverse is enough, and, you don't, I don't know. Well, this alien will have 5 arms. That's diversity. Well, sort of, but not really. I mean, better to have diverse actors in it and just let them be humanoid, if you ask me, but okay. What do I know? How many billion-dollar movie empires have I created? Okay. Well, speaking of billion-dollar empires, there's more news today that I guess you and I have both been remiss in not getting ourselves some billionaire friends. Things would be much easier. You'd have an easier time paying all your bills if you just made friends with the billionaire, as it turns out. Every time you think you've heard all there is to hear, and I don't know if anybody ever believes that, about Clarence Thomas, you find out there's something worse. There's more, it's worse, and today's no exception. Today's entry in the Clarence Thomas saga is that in addition to, my good friend and I, we go on vacations a lot, and he has a super yacht, and he invites us to come on the super yacht, and he generously will fly us to and from this super yacht as well. I don't think so, but okay, maybe. Also that my friend, we're just such good friends that he bought my mom's house and lets her live there. Gosh, that sounds unusual too. Oh, also I have apparently, according to the reporting, a grandnephew whom I am raising as a son living with us in our household, except he's not living with us in our household. He's at boarding school, and a very expensive boarding school at that. And my friend is such a good friend that he pays the tuition for that. And that seems a little unusual. That's not something I've run into, but it's real interesting to note that these people are such hardcore conservatives too. and are constantly preaching to you that, hard work and self-sacrifice will lead to the kind of life you're looking for eventually, and you're pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and, hey, we must live in a post-racial, post-racist society after all. We don't need all these voting rights protections or civil rights protections because I'm a black guy and a white guy is paying for everything, so that must mean there's no racism. I mean, I guess that's the lesson you draw from this. Not really sure what to make of it, but it's awfully corrupt. And of course, nothing will happen because in order to impeach a guy from the Supreme Court, you got to have a 2/3 majority in the Senate and a significant portion of this Senate and any foreseeable Senate is going to, I don't know, they just have pledged to kind of look past that in exchange for getting favorable rulings from the court. It's quite an annoying thing. And of course, he's not the only one. The story we told or began telling yesterday makes clear that there are differing levels of corruption, but probably corruption nonetheless happening among the other justices as well. And this time they've been clever in trying to cover their tracks by trying to pull the justices appointed by Democratic presidents in on the scheme as well. So there's that. Plus, of course, still looming out there, the weird arrangement by which the Chief Justice's wife makes tens of millions of dollars in income by introducing prominent lawyers to one another. Hey, it's a business, whatever. It's like $300,000 isn't enough. The fact that you're the highest regarded jurist in the land isn't enough. The fact that you can steer policy for decades to come isn't enough. I should also have millions and millions of dollars, maybe for nothing. It's a weird and entitled attitude for people who are making decisions about how the rest of you should just tough it out. And if you just scrimp and save, you too can one day something. But in the meantime, bring me another martini. And another thing, bring me a co-host for today. How about Greg Dworkin? That's good. Okay, already been delivered. Excellent. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. So I was listening to your introduction very diligently, like a Proud Boys juror. And by the way, I need a stapler. And, when you started, yes. Well, let's just say the first thing that occurred to me is do talk like a Pirates Day people say, may the 4th be with you, Arrrrh.
I guess so.
Talk Like a Pirate Day is in September, but Star Wars Day and Talk Like a Pirate Day are our two unofficial holidays.
Yes.
You don't get the day off.
Them. No.
But they're important.
Yes.
Socially and culturally. At least, if you're
right.
Like over 60.
Pi Day as well. I try and remember that.
Pi Day is important. Yeah.
But all of these fun ones, and then of course
because
the ones
it's a lot more fun talking about that than it is talking about corrupt Republicans.
Even though it's corrupt Republican
Day. Doing my diligence and listening to your opening,
yes,
is when you started to talk about how everybody should really make friends with a billionaire because things happen to you that are good.
Yeah, you get free stuff.
I thought you were talking about Herschel Walker.
Oh no, I wasn't. But he's probably friends with a billionaire, and things happen because of that.
Well, Roger Sullenberger reports today, May 4th. May the 4th be with you. He says, emails reveal jaw-dropping Herschel Walker money scandal. Emails show Herschel Walker solicited hundreds of thousands of dollars for his own business from a billionaire donor, with the donor believing he was giving to Walker's campaign. And in fact, the donor even said, according to the law, we can only give to these two entities because they are your campaign things. We can't give to this particular fake business that doesn't exist, which we already did. So please correct it and put the money back in the campaign where it belongs, which, of course, it's not clear that he ever did.
That's kind of that's just a very brazen scam. I do want to actually legally support your campaign. Yes, but is there some reason why? What if I put this money in this pocket
instead of that other pocket? So let me read to you the communication so you get a sense of it. It was good talking with you today. Tim McHugh, Executive Vice President for the Washington Corporations, wrote to Walker last November. After our call, Redacted reached out to me and said, a person clarified with you that any funds sent to HR talent account cannot legally be used for political purposes. Political contributions must go to either Team Herschel or 34N22. 34N22 was the super PAC supporting Walker. Walker was not allowed to solicit donations for the super PAC in excess of federal limits, which this amount of money explicitly was. But that wasn't McHugh's concern. He was worried about the hundreds of thousands of dollars his boss had wired to HR talent in March. We'll need your assistance to get the prior contributions made in March corrected.
Okay.
So while Walker's campaign was battered from the jump by a hurricane of controversies, this one stands out. According to the legal experts who spoke to the Daily Beast for this article, Roger Sullenberger is the reporter.
Yes. Crazy.
This scheme appears not to just be illegal. It appears to be unparalleled in its audacity and scope. The transactions raise questions about a slew of possible violations. In fact, these experts all said the scheme is so brazen that it appears to defy explanation, ranking it among the most egregious campaign finance violations in modern history.
Holy macaroni. George Santos says, hold my Zima.
Exactly.
So, Zima out there.
Looking at this and thinking, where's George Santos? Probably his campaign director.
Holy mackerel.
If he asked George Santos, he was.
I'm not going to let that guy just out-brazen me.
Brandon Fisher, a campaign finance lawyer,
really
deputy executive director of Documented, whatever that is,
I don't know,
remarked that the exchanges were stunning and, to my knowledge, without parallel in recent history. Campaign finance laws designed to prevent massive under-the-table payments like these.
Yes. This is exactly what this is meant to be. It's like, I didn't know. I killed the guy, but I didn't understand that law.
The law against murder is designed to make sure that you don't kill people. Yes, but you see, what happened is I slayed him.
Yeah, right. Slew.
And it doesn't say anything about slayed or slew or.
Right. True. That's exactly it. Obviously.
Paul S. Ryan. Not Paul Ryan, a campaign finance specialist and deputy executive director at the Funders Committee for Civic Participation, said a situation suggests a criminal violation that's extraordinary and unprecedented in my 25 years of campaign finance watchdog work. There is no legal way this could have played out. Now, neither Walker nor his wife, Julie Blanchard, returned the Daily Beast detailed request for comment.
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't either.
You caught me.
Right. According to legal experts, campaign violations become criminal if the violation was knowing and willful. Essentially, if the person understands the laws. So then you got that guy saying, look, I know what I'm doing is illegal, so you have to move the money around because otherwise it's illegal.
Yeah, but I didn't know it was
illegal. I didn't know it was illegal. I just wrote to you so that you would know. But I skipped over the part that I read my own mail.
Yeah.
And so it didn't occur to me.
Something. Put this in a different account.
Whatever.
What was it? HR talent?
Yeah, something like that.
HR.
Yeah.
What's the R?
I don't know. Running back.
Herschel Walker. Found it on Talk Like a Pirate Day. All right.
Amazing stuff. So, you were talking about corruption. Oh, yeah, sure. I mean,
it seems to be everywhere.
Clarence Thomas takes money for vacations. He has the same guy buy property and, take care of his mom. And by the way, that same guy loves him so much, he also, sends his essentially adopted son, another family member, for $150,000 a year worth of private school. But the important thing is this guy doesn't ask anything in return.
Yeah,
we always forget to add that part.
Right. He
and that makes it okay.
He just wants.
Just ask Justice Roberts.
Sure.
Or Justice Kavanaugh. For all I know, Harlan Crow paid his credit card bill.
Although as it turns out,
why? Because he's such good friends with Clarence Thomas.
That's boy, he is a nice friend. Any friend of yours is a friend of mine, and so therefore I have $1 billion and I can do whatever I want with it.
But no, you weren't talking about Clarence Thomas. You were talking about Herschel Walker.
Was I? Oh yeah. No, I was talking about the other billionaire. And
there's so many billionaires. I just get lost. And you step back and you think to yourself, is this why they wanted Citizens United? Is this why they wanted corporate money involved in politics so that they can get their stuff paid for?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not certain whether they were that forward thinking. I mean, I guess they figured, well, if as long as there's money in politics,
why don't we make
lots of
Citizens United legal? I mean, where's the harm? What could possibly go wrong?
Right. Oh, and then remember they were asked that directly, and they denied straight up. Yeah, I mean, this was what Alito was shaking his head about, right, at the State of the Union. And Obama knew it and said it right out loud at the State of the Union address that this would lead to an era of unprecedented political corruption, and makes these
and
illegal
Alito was shaking
payments.
his head because he's saying, not for us,
true.
we're above the law.
Not true. Yeah. And then he went out and took all the money. Although I haven't heard much about Alito taking the money. That's true.
No,
Maybe
he hasn't, but
not true.
we don't know yet, of course.
Right.
But
It's all
they don't
undisclosed.
like getting investigated like this. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens because, this is really getting to the point where Herschel Walker is in an office, nothing to do about it. Mm-hmm. But this is getting to the point where it's really tough to ignore what Clarence Thomas is doing.
Yes. This is another great test for whether or not we really have an impeachment clause in the Constitution.
Yeah.
Insurrection won't do it. Outright bribery won't do it.
It says right in the Constitution that there's no such thing as impeachment if you have a 50-50 Senate.
Right. Because
it says it right there.
Yeah, the only way to people are only going to be interested in fairness if it's a lopsided partisan body and someone from the other party has done something wrong.
Right. All right. So, let's move from one set of corruption, which ought to be under trial, and move to something which actually is
in the courts. So
in the courts right now. That's Lisa Rubin following the E. Jean Carroll case. A lot to be said about that.
Yes.
We have said a lot about it, and there's a lot more to be said about that.
Yeah.
But Lisa Rubin is a former litigator turned journalist, as she describes herself. She does analysis for NBC. She's very good. And she says, I'm always fascinated by the ways in which the way one profession proves circumstantial facts can bleed into the other profession.
Can bleed into the other profession? Is that what it was? Yeah, bless you.
Venn diagram
Sound like a
style,
little sneeze there. Okay.
They're not talking about slaying and killing. They're talking about how they can just, merge. So the E. Jean Carroll case exemplifies this feedback loop. If following the case, you might already know that in the fall of 2017, Carroll had planned to embark on a road trip and a book project in which she would collect the untold stories of pioneering independent women across America. She writes. Right. She's a journalist, Jean Carroll.
Oh, yes, she is.
Right, she gives advice, but she's a writer.
Right, sure.
She's going to do a book, and that's not inconsistent with the fact that she, by the way, is a writer.
Okay. Books are written all the time.
So, Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey published their bombshell reporting on Harvey Weinstein's decades of sexual assault. That reporting prompted Carroll to reassess her own untold stories.
Yeah, a lot of people.
That launched the Me Too movement. And eventually it led to her public disclosure that Trump raped her. But Me Too reverberates through the case in other more subtle ways. In the third piece in Kantor and Twohey's published work, they feature the stories of women assaulted by Weinstein in the 70s and 80s, women who didn't complain to their employer, much less the cops.
Yeah.
That's relevant, of course, because the Trump defense is she didn't scream, so it didn't happen.
Right. This is like from an ancient defense.
Right.
Thankfully,
how can you show these women were credible? It's so ancient. It was 2 days ago. Well, first, the sheer number of them lent each other more credibility than she had alone. Like in Bill Cosby. Like you couldn't have one Cosby accuser. You needed all of them. One woman was a lone accuser. Dozens of women were a pattern. And that's one of the things they're trying to establish in the trial, by the way. And that's why they have people who were assaulted by Trump but weren't E. Jean Carroll and may or may not be past the, the due date.
A through D, Jean Carroll.
But the point is to establish a pattern, and that's being allowed.
Mm-hmm. Well, good.
Just as the Access Hollywood tape is being allowed.
Yes. We're having access to it.
Any reference to DNA on E. Jean Carroll's dress is not being allowed. I'm not sure.
Is that right?
I didn't follow that little nugget. I'm not.
Yeah, I don't know why it was disallowed.
I'd have to go look that up. But the Access Hollywood stuff is allowed. So, and again, as you pointed out, since this is not a criminal trial, it's a civil trial, there's a lot of hearsay stuff that is allowed that otherwise wouldn't be. So how could you show these women were credible? Well, the sheer number of them. But more importantly, the Times reporters, that would be Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey, asked those who accused Weinstein of assaults decades in the past, who did you tell and when? Okay. And the reporters tracked down these people, a close friend here, former neighbors there, and had them corroborate the accusers on record. And it's those two methods of corroboration, finding eerily similar stories of women previously unknown to each other and locating the friends and loved ones in whom the accusers confided in real time. The Carroll's lawyers are now imported into the courtroom. Mm-hmm. Carroll wasn't seen or heard by anybody during her fight at Bergdorf. She also admits she sought no help from law enforcement, received no medical or mental health treatment, and generally told no one until 2019. Historically, these facts would have made her case a loser. But what her lawyers do have is Me Too-like corroboration. They have two witnesses who, like Carroll, allege assaults by Trump in 1979 and 2005, and like Carroll, begin with an unwanted, unexpected kiss in tight quarters not easily escaped from. They also have the friends Carroll told in real time. Lisa Birnbach, who testified yesterday that a breathless, shaky Carroll called her immediately after leaving Bergdorf's, and Carol Martin, then Carroll's co-worker, who said she was told 2 days later at Martin's home. And it's that kind of evidence that has the potential to transform the Carroll case from what we used to see as a hopeless he said, she said, to a cohesive, persuasive presentation of a pattern. Mm-hmm. All the law needed was some dogged investigative reporting to light the way. So basically, she says, and again, whether you're talking about Jeffrey Epstein and the Miami Herald, or whether you're talking about Harvey Weinstein and, Megan Twohey and Jodi Kantor, when you put investigative reporters, in this case, who happen to be women investigating men who abused, and you can put together with good investigative reporting, nailing down sources and corroboration, turns out it helps the legal profession. And the legal profession read the book, learned the lessons, and are bringing it to this trial. And that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it works a lot of times in law, right? The book advances a explanatory theory of why
the
society
FBI didn't
needs
read the book when they investigated Brett Kavanaugh. They just did a cursory whatever and then moved on. This is the exact opposite.
They were like, well, if they read the book, they were like, hey, see this book? Don't do this.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's the how not to manual. But, yeah, I mean, very frequently, a new way of thinking about something like, well, in this case, rape and really rape culture, that was the big difference, like explaining it as, well, this is a cultural phenomenon that we have here, and you need to understand why women don't speak out, why, these things that are often raised as defenses at rape trials, she didn't scream, she didn't tell anybody, are actually not indicative of the innocence of the accused, but rather a common problem that arises when people are actually victimized, and here's why. And if you can explain that societally in a way that makes sense and makes sense to judges, lawyers, and jury pools, you begin to change who gets convicted or held liable in cases like this. Whether it's about rape or any other a purely legal doctrine where this stuff happens through law reviews and white papers and the like.
Whether it's subtle or whether it's under the radar or just sort of subliminal or in the back of your conscience, a single case definitely could be seen as he said, as she said, because nobody's perfect. And certainly E. Jean Carroll isn't the mythical perfect rape victim that the Trump campaign and his lawyers would like to portray as, well, she didn't meet the perfect standard, therefore you can discount everything she said. They're not property. We talked about this yesterday. And in fact, when you have a number of people, and there is a large number. 2 are testifying for E. Jean Carroll, but there's 24 others who could have testified. This is a piece from the Bulwark talking about Trump's women, and it mentions a tweet by a fellow named James Palmer. That's not the Palmer Report, just another guy named James Palmer.
Term for them,
it's pretty remarkable that a former president of the United States and likely Republican candidate in 2024 has multiple well-attested sexual assault claims against him. And the media largely treats it like a page 6 story that references the tabloids who often put salacious stuff on page 6.
Yeah, they should put it on.
And Trump's accusers, because I'm not a lawyer and don't play one on television, says the writer of this Bulwark piece. And believe me, that's a very familiar sentiment to me.
Yeah, I thought that was, okay.
I'm not prejudicing the E. Jean Carroll case or making any predictions about the outcome, but this tweet that I just read to you is a useful reminder just how numbed we have become by all of this. By the latest count, 26 women have accused Trump of sexual assault and misconduct. And here is the full list.
Wow.
And Trump has denied all of the allegations. But again, it's getting Cosby level. But has not yet made good on his promise to sue any of the women, although 2 women have sued him. And the White House says that Trump's election proves the American people don't consider the allegations disqualifying.
I mean, I guess.
Right?
Some American people.
2020. But despite Trump's denials, 50% of voters, 59% of women, 41% of men, surveyed in a December 2017 Quinnipiac poll think the president should resign as a result of sexual misconduct.
Oh. Well, then he should.
He didn't. But, it's just impossible to imagine that somebody with more than 24 accusations of sexual assault would be able to survive in any other field except politics.
Yes. And so that he went into it. Perfect.
Yeah. And more to say about that after the break.
Well, it's not that the American public thinks that they're not serious. It's that the Electoral College doesn't think so. Remember, we're a republic, not a democracy, man, or whatever.
Well, I have a piece called A Moral Dilemma after the break about why you work for Republicans.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue rounding up terrible things about Republicans.
Well, it's funny. I was saying to David over the break that normally in my mind, in the back of my mind somewhere, I think of this as a Congress Matters show where I get to talk to David and ask all my questions about Congress and he gets to answer them. But in fact, lately it's been legal questions.
Yeah. Well,
David has law training, so, this
I got some of that.
Helpful. But nonetheless, it's just weird because Republicans are so corrupt, like they're on trial.
Yeah, all the time.
And everywhere. The ones that aren't on trial should be, like Herschel Walker and Clarence Thomas.
Well, I guess shortly enough, Clarence Thomas, maybe not, but Herschel Walker might find himself there soon.
Right. In order, what Clarence Thomas did wasn't illegal for 2 reasons.
Okay.
You can't show a quid pro quo, and he's above the law because he's a Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, the second one is a little harder.
Well, it depends who you ask. Ask Alito. He'll tell you.
Yeah. I don't know whether it's getting to the level where it's like, yeah, all right, well, there was no quid pro quo, but
Oh yeah, it's like
you were supposed to disclose it, and
it's like Donald Trump's women. If you put enough of them together,
yeah,
en masse,
I guess so.
the whole group of them tell a story that an individual thing wouldn't tell.
Yes. And that's the part, by the way, that I think that's easier to deal with in a civil trial than in a criminal trial is demonstrating a pattern of similar behavior. Ordinarily, it's something that in a criminal trial, they just say, listen, you're only on trial for this crime. This is the one we need to focus on.
That's why they passed RICO.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. And that was a big fight over the constitutionality of RICO for that reason.
Yeah, and it turns out that's what you need when you're dealing with serial criminals like Trump.
That's exactly it. As a very good point, is they had arrived at a point where criminals understood, okay, well, that's the formal legalistic rules. I will conduct my business in such a way that everything's wink, wink. And, just to compare to what Clarence Thomas, well, how about if just don't ever write down the quid pro quo, then I can take all the bribes I want. Not really.
Listen, you guys are saying I threatened this guy. I didn't threaten him. I was being sympathetic. I just said to him, look, it'd be a shame if something happened to your business.
Yeah.
Right? That's not a threat.
I just thought he looked tired.
My heart. I got a big heart.
Yeah, I love this guy. I'm concerned about his health.
Time.
He looked tired. I just thought he should sleep. And he likes fishes.
So I thought he should sleep with the fishes.
That's all I'm saying.
He said he likes fishing, so I took care of it.
Yeah, right. So you can't just get away with that in perpetuity. Eventually, hopefully, the law catches up with you. But yeah, that's what this pattern of behavior thing is. You can get away with that a lot easier in a civil setting. I mean, they'd love to have them in a criminal setting if they could get it, but it's too late for that.
In any case.
Yeah.
So this is Vanity Fair, Molly John Fast writing, E. Jean Carroll's quest for justice and the carnage of Donald Trump's misogyny.
All right.
The 79-year-old writer's rape case, and by the way, she's a good friend. Molly John Fast and E. Jean Carroll are very good friends.
Are they? Okay.
The 79-year-old writer's rape case shows what happens to a country that elects a president who so openly embraces degrading women.
Mm-hmm.
The trial, which continues this week, is, of course, about Carroll, but it also speaks to the state of the feminist movement. Trump is no longer in the White House for now, and for the first time, we can look at the carnage of having a president who openly embraced misogyny. Misogyny, like racism, thrives when it has a cheerleader, when it has somebody who gives the supporters permission to engage in it, that permission structure we sometimes talk about on the show.
That's right.
With racism, we can measure an increase in race-related harassment and hate crimes, which, for example, went up the day Trump was elected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's profoundly hard to measure what an increase in misogyny looks like. We saw a profound backlash toward Christine Blasey Ford, who accused Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh of sexually assaulting her when they were teenagers. Mm-hmm. Kavanaugh denied the allegations. Blasey Ford had to effectively go into hiding after coming forward. And Carroll's narration of her own experience after coming forward is a pretty good example of the kind of misogyny that Trumpism embraces and the impact it has on those brave enough to step up. It hit me and it laid me low because I lost my reputation. Nobody looked at me the same. It was gone. Even people who knew me looked at me with pity, and the people who had no opinion now thought I was a liar and hated me, she said. The force of hatred coming at me was staggering. And Molly John Fast goes on to say, there's been many moments in the trial that tangibly laid bare why women don't report sexual assault. Trump's attorney, Joe Tacopina, was profoundly aggressive with Carroll, a near octogenarian. I'm telling you, he raped me whether I screamed or not. I don't need an excuse for not screaming, Carroll responded to Tacopina's repetitive drumbeat of questioning, which the judge, Lewis Kaplan, called argumentative and repetitive last Thursday. As if right on cue, Trump offered up the most misogynistic possible response of being accused of sexual misconduct. While I'm not supposed to say it, I will. The woman isn't my type, he wrote on Truth Social. He said that before at this time, in the middle of the trial. It's not the first time Trump has used the defense.
That's why he's in court now. I mean...
Yeah, after all, Carroll's hardly Trump's only accuser. Yeah. At last count, 26 women have made allegations. Carroll's aren't an enormous shock to the system either. Trump supporters, including evangelicals, have long reconciled with the idea that more than 24 women have said their guy sexually assaulted them. Mm-hmm. So it's just, she talks about how hard it is to watch your friend go through this, and just reminds us that, it's all part and parcel of a pattern Now, whether that pattern matters or not, I am not in the LOL nothing matters school of political philosophy. I think it all matters. And we'll have some proof of that in a little while. But, the bottom line is if you're looking to see whether Trump is in jail or whether Trump loses an election, you have to wait for those events. Usually progress is a bit and a snippet at a time. It's incremental, and that annoys people because they want like something big to happen. And that typically isn't what happened.
Like falling into an alligator pit.
But, the whole pattern, when you put it together, tells you who Donald Trump is. We know this. So SB Date asks the very interesting question in the Huffington Post. The moral dilemma over working for Donald Trump. It's a hot market for political job seekers, but dozens of GOP operatives have chosen instead to try to put a despicable ex-president back in the White House. Mm-hmm. They could be working for anybody. They could be working for Ron DeSantis, another jerk. They could be, working for, they could have been working for Herschel Walker, who's a crook.
Yeah, he's got money now.
But instead, they're choosing to work for Donald Trump even now.
Suckers. They're not even going to get paid.
Defending the indefensible, said Al Cardenas, former chair of the Republican Party of Florida, from where former President Trump is running his campaign. I don't know what's in their hearts. All I know is it's a good payday.
Is it?
And while most of those working for Trump's campaign, his Save America Political Committee or his supporting super PAC, are either new to politics or have gone personally loyal to Trump and his lies, a few are highly regarded names in Republican politics. He mentions Chris La Civita, for example, worked 2 stints running the National Republican Senatorial Committee and engineered the infamous Switvote ads. Tony Fabrizio, GOP presidential nominee Bob Dole's poster, and has done numerous Republican statewide races. Sarah Longwell, who's an ever-Trumper, says, these are old hands who should know better. Anybody who, if in your judgment you think he should be in charge of the country again, I think your judgment's terrible, and I think that's immoral. And most of the people that they talked to refused to go on record. A few did. Those who didn't work for him. Mac Stepanovich, who with Cardenas helped make Republicans a dominant party in Florida, said Trump's repeated lies about a stolen election and inciting the January 6th assault on his behalf should have been the last straw for anybody considering working for Trump. He's a despicable human being. He's dishonest. He's a cheat. If he were my boss, I'd quit. But if he's my employee, I'd fire him. If he's my son-in-law, I'd horsewhip him.
What?
1, he's a bad man. And 2, he's a danger to representative democracy in this country. But, when you go and you ask the people who did choose to work for him, most of them wouldn't go on record. But Tony Fabrizio last year was on David Axelrod's podcast. And he said he was still in a state of shock watching the Capitol violence on January 6th and believed Trump should have done something to stop it, but defended his decision to work with him. This is just a classic line. If people are expecting us to be the moral police, I think they're expecting a lot from our profession, because our profession isn't going to do that.
Because our profession isn't moral.
Yeah, I mean, it's right there. So that's why people vote for Trump. They don't care. And that's why they're just like the MAGA voters.
Nazis.
I think over time, it does matter, and you whittle away 1% here and 1% there, and that's how it works. Not, oh my God, I saw Access Hollywood, and 50% of Republicans are not going to vote for me. That's not what happens. So if and when Trump is guilty in this E. Jean Carroll trial, it'll make a difference on the margins. It won't make a difference otherwise, but he'll have indictments and convictions, on his resume.
That's right. Now, had he been hanged several years ago, people would feel
we
differently
want the
about
criminal
cheerleading.
indictments and convictions,
Yeah,
but civil indictments and convictions have already happened to him. Trump Organization is a crooked organization.
Right.
It's not slander to say that. It's a matter of fact.
That's right. You know what though? You get sued for slander anyway. You'll win because it's not slander, because it's fact. But he'll sue you anyway, which actually
he'll threaten
is also in the news.
Money.
If you say he raped you, he'll threaten to sue you, but then won't sue. But everything else he does, in fact, sue you over.
It's not the first. He hasn't sued CNN and the news organizations. He threatened to do that lots of times.
Though he did, this is in the news today, that he sued his niece, Mary, and the New York Times over those stories that
mostly Mary
led to those. Yeah. Well,
he didn't really care about the New York Times.
No, but he did sue them, and it was frivolous and stupid. And the news is that was dismissed as against the New York Times just as of yesterday. With another note that says, you really don't understand the way the law works at all, and you should stop wasting your money on these suits.
You don't understand that I was simply trying to make my niece Mary's life miserable.
Right, and that was what was happening. And so now we're working our way through it, but she's going to be reimbursed for her attorney's fees in defending most of this suit. That much so far is certain. And whether or not the rest of all his claims are dismissed outright and he has to pay yet more is still up in the air. But as far as the New York Times goes, yeah, that one's done, and you really don't get it, sir. You should just stop suing people.
So this is an article by Aaron Blake, which, it's under the head of The Fix, and I'm laughing because Blake is just so much better than Crystal ever was. A harsh verdict on Fox News post-Dominion, even from GOP. In a poll, Americans say by a 30-point margin that Fox host knowingly aired false 2020 election claims.
Well,
Respondents include significant numbers of Republicans. So basically what's happened, in a new poll from The Economist and YouGov, Americans 51-21 that Fox host said things about the 2020 election they knew to be untrue. Even Fox's base of Republican-leaning Americans takes dim view. Nearly as many Republicans said Fox hosts effectively lied, 31%, as dispute that assertion, 34%. And the near-even split was similar among supporters of Trump, 30-35. So the point is, okay, well, this Dominion thing happened, and then they settled. I wanted to see Fox apologize every 5 minutes on the air. That would have been a complete waste of time, because the only thing that would have happened is that people would have changed the channel. And it turns out they're changing the channel anyway. The viewership for the 8 p.m. Slot is down 50%, and the viewership for the 9 and 10 p.m. slots that follow it is down 25%. I think that's true for the one before it as well. So Fox is bleeding customers, which is going to make it harder for them to negotiate lots of money from the cable companies that carry them, and that's where Fox makes his money. And so that trial is going to have more than the $700 some odd million that they paid out. It's also going to have effects on carriage fees and viewership and ad revenue and all sorts of other things. And that stuff's going to take time to accumulate. And that's one of those situations where, I wanted to see Rupert Murdoch, marched out frog marched in an orange jumpsuit. Yes. No, that's not how it works.
Oh.
The way it works is that Fox News takes an enormous hit financially, which helps to convince them to do things like in an iffy case where they're not really sure what the right thing is to do, because basically in their minds they're Tony Fabrizio, and their job isn't to be the moral police and tell the truth about stuff. Nonetheless, Tucker Carlson is too big a risk where he's fired.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's been incredibly helpful, because Tucker Carlson will never have the same platform again that he had before.
I hope not.
And he's a white nationalist, and that's good.
Yes.
That he doesn't have the same platform.
That's true. I mean, yes, he's still out there. He's still
somewhere.
alive.
I mean, again,
he's making videos
I take the
like
Glenn
Osama
Beck,
bin
Bill
Laden,
O'Reilly, Megyn Kelly arc of their careers seriously. And Tucker Carlson is so talented that he's got the same arc.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I hope so. It's certainly it's looking that way at the moment. He puts out weirdo videos and nothing happens, so that's good. And it is a little Osama bin Laden-like, isn't it? He just puts his manifesto on videotape and puts it out on YouTube and thinks things will happen, and as it turns out, people really don't care. All right.
So Fox had the lowest lowest ratings for accuracy compared to CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, and CBS. Only 12% overall said Fox's 2020 coverage was almost always accurate. And the results aligns with other polling showing that despite Fox claims to high viewer trust, the network actually ranks toward the bottom when you ask Americans of all stripes for an up or down vote. Given that, it's worth asking how much this has to do with Dominion. A strong majority of Republicans, after all, falsely believe the 2020 election was stolen. We don't know if they believe that. We know that they say that to pollsters. And I don't know if it's because it's a tribal thing and we have to support our Republicans who say that, or whether we really believe it, or it doesn't matter because as long as we win, who cares? So maybe some are taking issue not with Dominion, but with Fox having said President Biden won the election. Maybe, he writes, but other polling reinforces the idea that many Republicans know how ridiculous the Dominion and voting machine claims were and are judging Fox accordingly. Now, another YouGov poll from just after the settlement asked this in a slightly different way. Did Fox knowingly broadcast false claims about Dominion specifically? Similar split. 31% of Republicans saying it did, 39% saying it didn't. Again, a third of Republicans know this is BS.
Okay.
And overall,
Now
the split is 46-27 against Fox. So it's not helpful if you're a propaganda network, which is what Fox is, to have people not believe you. It's like, the Kremlin says that Ukraine attacked the Kremlin trying to kill Putin, and that therefore justifies anything they do in the war from now on, even though a Ukrainian offensive is gearing up. Do we believe that? No. Russia said it. It's propaganda. And so the ability to do false flags and other things, sort of drops when people don't believe you anymore. Same thing is true with propaganda outlets like RT.
Yes.
Or Fox.
Right.
When people realize Fox, that that's what you do, your ability to sway things matters less than it used to. Now, again, if you're talking about a 50-50 election, maybe it matters. But if you're talking about a 52-48% election, maybe it doesn't, because if you can only move at 1 point, maybe it's not enough. Now, Fox's true base isn't all Republicans. It's mostly a subset within the conservative movement. For instance, in a recent poll of daily Fox News viewers, Aaron Blake writes, 52% said Tucker Carlson's dismissal was a bad thing, and just 21% of less frequent Fox viewers said the same. And Trump supporters, according to Quinnipiac, were less likely than supporters of DeSantis to call for accountability for Fox. And that gets how the most loyal Fox viewers are probably the ones most interested in the kind of conspiratorial coverage that Carlson provided. They're the viewers Fox took care to tell what they wanted to hear. And while perhaps some of them have come to believe that involved Fox lying to them, it's just as likely most of them never will. But for a network so focused on appealing to Trump supporters who are quite willing to believe the election was stolen, having even that group offer such a split verdict on your handling of these claims, that's a pretty stunning indictment.
All right.
Right? Another way to take a look at it, Sarah Rumpf is writing in Mediaite. Fox paid $787.5 million for Trump's election lies, and now he's repaying them with a punch in the face by going after them for getting rid of Carlson. So, it's that's another way, sort of the backdoor way, that Fox News loses with this whole Tucker Carlson Dominion thing.
Getting punched in the face by Donald Trump?
Well, getting punched in the head from behind.
Oh. Yeah, punches are
Trump will participate in a town hall next week on CNN. I mean, for example.
That's true.
That alone is going to cost them money.
I'm curious what, if anything, we should take from the fact that Trump is out there defending Tucker Carlson, who, a couple weeks ago, the big story was, Tucker Carlson says Trump is demonic and he loathes him. Like, usually that leads to weeks and weeks of Trump, grumbling about that and calling you a liar
Trump's
and a jerk.
Trump's not an idiot. He knows who his grifter base is.
Yeah, it's just weird.
Basically, Tucker Carlson said bad things about me, but I forgive him because he's white.
Yeah,
and even if he weren't white, the real important thing is his listeners are white, and there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
So I forgive his listeners. And if that means forgiving him in order to forgive his listeners, I'll do it. That's what Trump's thinking.
That seems clear. Wow. All right.
But listen, what do you expect Trump to be? The moral police? Come on.
It's not his job. Come on.
It's not his job.
Yeah. He's a weird guy, and he's gimmitarian, and I think we can understand that. Oh, well. Womp womp.
So this is Dan Frupkin writing in Press Watch. Here's how CNN can reduce the harm of giving Trump the microphone. Sure, CNN will get great ratings for an hour, but at what cost to their reputation in the country? It's like 2015 all over again with CNN giving him free access to lie to their audience, except this time the guy who tried to overthrow the U.S. government and faces a litany of possible felony charges, is the guy. Charlotte Klein reported Tuesday for Vanity Fair that CNN doesn't intend for anchor Caitlin Collins to ask many questions herself. The primary focus is candidate interacts with voters, which is fine because sometimes the voters ask way better questions.
Like Ken Bone.
Yeah. That's a mistake that David Shalian is making. Why we convene these things is to let the people interact. That's a mistake, but CNN will still bear responsibility for all the questions. First, it agreed to limit the audience to people who plan to vote in the New Hampshire Republican primary. And second, questions will go through a thorough vetting process to assure accuracy. So if the questions are weak, it's on CNN.
The question, we have to verify the accuracy of a question? I mean,
yeah.
The accuracy of the question is,
well,
what
they
words
don't want
did you
questions
use?
like, why did you rape E. Jean Carroll? They
Why
want to
not?
screen those.
Okay, but that's
They
not
don't
an
find those
accuracy
helpful.
issue. That's a
Now,
content
that's a legitimate
issue.
question, but
Yeah.
they don't want them.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, because look, there's an answer he can give. He could
As
say, "I didn't."
Northeastern University law professor Jeremy Paul tweeted, "Ask any question that starts with how did you or why did you?"
Okay.
And those are exactly the ones they won't let.
All right.
CNN's own Daniel Dale has explained even basic pushback, words like who, what, how, can effectively expose Trump's lies for what they are. So, for instance, when Trump says, people say, you ask what people?
Yeah.
CNN's obligation,
People.
whether they like it or not, is to confront Trump with the facts that he avoids or denies and to demand concrete answers, and they must be prepared to rebut his further lies in real time. By contrast, if they let him get away with saying the same old things, it'll be a journalistic catastrophe and another self-inflicted humiliation for CNN. I'm betting on the latter.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it will be.
Why are they doing it? Eyeballs, therefore money.
Yeah. Well,
Very
people will
straightforward.
want to tune in. They know very well. Like, what is the example we always get? Oh, yeah, right. An enthusiastic vote is worth the same as the meh unenthusiastic vote. A vote is a vote.
Vote is a vote, as long as you
right.
vote.
And I guess what they're saying is, well, people will say that we didn't do hard-hitting follow-ups, but the only way they'll know that we didn't do hard-hitting follow-up questions is if they watch and see us do it. And an eyeball watching us skeptically is worth as much as an eyeball watching us credulously. So,
Yeah. They can mad watch us.
yes.
I watched you because I was mad. Well, that's great.
Right.
Our advertisers
yes,
love you for it.
provided you are one of those rare people who can say, this is terrible, this is the worst, this is a journalistic outrage. Hey, that looks like a good detergent. This is awful, I can't stand this anymore. Wow, that toothpaste really works.
Well, even,
If you can do that,
well,
that's
like
what
the
they're
old joke,
looking for.
the food is terrible here in such small portions. That was a terrible CNN thing. I can't believe they only did a half hour on it.
Right. Can't wait to watch again. I hope they do another one that's just as bad so I can be just as outraged.
Finally, the last of the trials. We're
Yeah.
talking Proud Boy trial here. Empty Wheel has a nice piece. The diligent Proud Boys jury. Can we also get a stapler, please? It was one
what's
of the
happening?
notes they
What's
wrote
that?
to Judge Tim Kelly.
They asked for a stapler?
They asked for a stapler. They asked that they correct some of the spelling mistakes and other discrepancies on notes from some of the Trump lawyers. I mean, they were really good. Yesterday, there were several interesting notes in the Proud Boys jury, including one identifying a seeming discrepancy in their instructions,
Oh.
which led Tim Kelly to note how diligent they were. My favorite note, as I wrote at the time, was asking for a stapler. I'd like to explain a different note, which may suggest where the jury's heading, and heading, it seems, in the reasonably near future. It asks for counts number 1 and 4.
Yeah.
Now, count 1 of the indictment charges that from in and around December 19th, 2020, through in and around January 2021, the defendants participated in a conspiracy to do at least one of two things. 1, to oppose by force the authority of the government of the United States, or 2, to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States by force.
All right.
And the jury asked for counts 1 and 4, and this is count 1 here with that two-part thing you might have done. The conspiracy charges that have more than one goal listed, can one agreed-upon objective simultaneously satisfy both goals?
All right.
Also, we didn't receive instructions on what to do if the jury doesn't reach unanimity on a charge. How should we proceed in this scenario? The answer to that one is the judge says, send me a note.
Yeah.
Don't tell me how many have decided. I don't want to know if it's 11-1 or 3-9. Just send me a note and I'll help you. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, the judge reminded the jury, you can give a partial verdict on any one of the defendants at any time. Oh. You don't have to wait for the end of the trial to tell us about all 5.
Okay.
So you can say, this one's obviously guilty, the others we're working on. That'd be okay.
Okay. That's good.
I don't know if that'll happen, but that was part of his instruction. Now,
that's nice.
The instructions described the 4th one. They said counts 1 and 4, interfering with a government agent this way. Count 4 of the indictment charges that from in and around December 19th, 2020, through around January 2021, the defendants participated in a conspiracy to prevent members of Congress and law enforcement officers from discharging their duties, which is a violation of the law. And that the defendant agreed with at least one other person to, by force, intimidation, or threat, either prevent a member of Congress or a federal law enforcement officer from discharging a duty, or induce a member of Congress or federal law enforcement to leave the place where that person's duties are required to be performed.
All right.
So basically, if you come in and say, vote the way I want or I will hang you, or even, this is a nice House of Representatives you got here, it'd be a shame if something happened to it, that's illegal.
Yeah, even illegal to come in and say, you should leave now.
Yeah.
Not telling you why.
So again, they want to know, well, can one thing satisfy these 2-part counts? Okay. So if we decide, they did decide to come in and try to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law, is that good enough for both counts there?
Okay. Now we have to wait and see what
because
he says.
we have issues about whether or not they really agreed to use force, but we agree that they agreed to show up, which is all you need to do for seditious conspiracy.
Okay. We don't know if they agreed to use force. They just came in body armor.
The jury, you don't need to have a seditious plan.
Yeah.
You just need to have agreed, even on the spot, to do this. So the details are impressive, but the jury's impressive too. Marcy thinks that it's not really going to take all that long to come up with something, and they're going to come up with something soon because they're asking detailed questions about the nitty-gritty stuff.
All right. That's good. Any reason why they want a stapler?
I don't know.
Not sure. Okay. We can look into it.
They could put together, this is for this defendant, this is for this defendant, or this is for this charge, this is for that charge. So the papers don't get all, it's allergy season. What if you sneeze and you mess the papers up?
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I guess Greg's enthusiastic explanation of all of these things didn't, I guess, all make it onto the air, but you probably had a good idea of what it is that he was supposing. And, I don't know whether there's an answer even in Marcy Wheeler's detailed writing. I don't know whether they ever revealed their answer about why they wanted a stapler, but I guess they must just be organized people and they want to staple certain things together, and maybe that's their way of facilitating the idea that they can send out partial verdicts along the way. And if you can staple together all the things that they feel like they have been wrapped up and put them in a different folder, then they can focus on what's I really don't know. Other than that, the only other thing that I can think of is that the guy Milton, the character from Office Space, is in there, and he was all he's concerned about is recovering the stapler that he was told he could keep because it's a high quality swing line product. It's an endorsement. You can send me a check for that one. And that these new cheapo ones that they get from the office store are just no good. All right, no idea what's going on with that one. But I'm glad they're getting closer to a verdict, and I like the idea of their being able to send out partial verdicts along the way. That'll keep us all engaged and lead to a lot less confusion, I hope, in their work. So, as I said, there's a bunch of other things that we want to catch up with. Do we want to read through the Clarence Thomas thing just so that we all have the real nitty-gritty on what's going on? I think so. I think we want to be up to date and up to speed on all the details here because by the time we digest them, if we wait too long, there'll be new ones and we'll miss out on our opportunity to be fully outraged. So we'll make it quick as best we can and give you at least the necessary details. Clarence Thomas had a child in private school. That doesn't mean that while he was in private school, he had a child with someone. What they mean is, of course, he was putting a child, not his own, though he was treating this person as sort of kind of their own, almost adoptive, and putting them through private school, except he wasn't putting them through private school. Harlan Crow was. And that's what's so weird. ProPublica, of course, has this story, and I think it's their own and exclusively, although they don't splash their whole page with exclusive this, that, or the other thing. And I think that might be because they're sort of that news coalition, and it doesn't really work that way to say it's exclusive. Anyway, it doesn't matter. What matters here is the actual news. Harlan Crow paid the tuition. Crow paid for private school for a relative Thomas said he was raising, quote, as a son. This is way outside the norm, said a former White House ethics lawyer. That sums up the whole thing, really, in just one subheader for this, but there's more details than that. Also interesting, just the idea of I'm raising this person as a son. You mean like you're taking on responsibility for their care and feeding and schooling? Because you're not. No, I mean something else, I guess. So Joshua Kaplan, Justin Elliott, and Alex Mirjeski, I'm hoping I pronounced that correctly, are the authors credited in the byline on this piece. And here we go. In 2008, ancient history, right? Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas decided to send his teenage grandnephew to Hidden Lake Academy. Don't put him out in the open at Exposed Lake Academy. You want to put him at Hidden Lake Academy when you're going to be doing it illegally. It is a private boarding school in the foothills of northern Georgia. The boy, Mark Martin, which I thought was a NASCAR driver, and is, but it's a different Mark Martin, I guess, was far from home. For the previous decade, he had lived with the justice and his wife in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. Thomas had taken legal custody of Martin when he was 6 years old and had recently told an interviewer he was, quote, raising him as a son. Not grooming him or kidnapping him or anything like that. Raising him as a son. A son that a billionaire pays for and is sponsored. But the other Mark Martin has lots of sponsors too. Why shouldn't this one? I guess that's the thinking here. Tuition at the boarding school ran more than $6,000 a month. But Thomas did not cover the bill, so no problem. Even though they pay these guys almost $300,000, he could have covered it, but he didn't. Harlan Crow did. A bank statement for the school from July of 2009, buried in unrelated court filings, somehow, shows the source of Martin's tuition payment for that month, the company of billionaire real estate magnate Harlan Crow. The payments extended beyond that month. According to Christopher Grimwood, a former administrator at the school, Crow paid Martin's tuition the entire time he was a student there, which was about a year, Grimwood told ProPublica. Harlan picked up the tab, said Grimwood, who got to know Crow. I mean, he refers to him by first name, like really, as opposed to saying, Crow or Harlan Crow or Mr. Crow or Trammell Crow, the company. Harlan picked up the tab. Why does he say it that way? Because he got to know Crow and the Thomases and had access to school financial information throughout his work as an administrator, which is interesting because that's usually the kind of person who then refuses to cooperate and won't tell you anything. But in this case, I don't know. He is. Before and after his time at Hidden Lake, Martin attended a second boarding school, Randolph-Macon Academy in Virginia. That's a name I've heard. Harlan said he was paying for the tuition at Randolph-Macon Academy as well, Grimwood said, recalling a conversation he had with Crow during a visit to the billionaire's Adirondacks estate. What business have you there, sir? One wonders. The ProPublica interviewed Martin, the kid, his former classmates, and former staff at both schools. The exact total Crow paid for Martin's education over the years remains unclear. If he paid If he paid for all 4 years at the two schools, the price tag could have exceeded $150,000. That's according to public records of tuition rates at the schools. Of course, maybe they gave him a sweetheart deal. I don't know. Doesn't say. We did say this part. Thomas did not report the tuition payments from Crow. Problem all by itself. Same problem we keep having over and over, as if there were a pattern of disturbing behavior here. Thomas did not report the tuition payments from Crow on his annual financial disclosures. Several years earlier, Thomas disclosed a gift of $5,000 for Martin's education from another friend. He's got a lot of good friends. It is not clear why he reported that payment, but not Crow's. And the answer is because this one got embarrassing. $5,000 he was willing to live with, but $150,000 he didn't want anyone to know about. The tuition payments add to the picture of how the Republican mega donor has helped fund the lives of Thomas and his family. So in order to put this in the context of the story we read yesterday, and I really do want to continue with that story too, about what George Mason University's School of Law, the Antonin Scalia School of Law, or law school, because they had to change the name again, remember. What they're doing is using billionaire money and wealthy Republican donor money to finance lifestyles for the Supreme Court. They get paid plenty of money, but I'm sure over the years it's grated on them. We're the top lawyers in the country, but really the real top lawyers in the country in private practice are making millions of dollars in a year as partners in these enormously well-off firms. And here they are, the top, supposedly the top legal minds in the country, making only $300,000 and enjoying prestige and security and benefits beyond compare, given that they can, like we said, influence the direction of the country and interpretation of the Constitution for decades or maybe even hundreds of years to come. But that's not enough for them. They also want mega yachts and fancy vacations. And to different extents, they're basically having billionaire donors finance these lifestyles that they wish they had, that's supposed to go along with the gravity of their office, supposedly. It's really weird how incredibly greedy they are. Anyway, the tuition payments add to the picture of how Republican mega donors have helped fund the lives of Thomas and his family. So this is just Thomas. And remember also, he was mentioned in the story yesterday that he most frequently, when he taught classes for George Mason University, did so on campus. And I don't know whether everybody thought, oh, well, how humble of him to do. And he could instead have been taking luxury vacations, as Justice Gorsuch was doing, and turning that into his teaching experience. And remember, he didn't need that because he had another billionaire who was already giving him the fantasy vacations. And so his vacation life was already covered. And Harlan Crow may have grown jealous if Clarence Thomas had accepted luxury vacations from anyone else. Who knows? So he agreed to teach on campus. What a great guy. Anyway, back to this story. You can't be having secret financial arrangements, said Mark W. Bennett, a retired federal judge appointed by President Bill Clinton, even though really it doesn't matter. You should be able to understand that you're not supposed to have secret financial arrangements no matter who appointed you. But if that were the case, then these Republican-appointed justices wouldn't be taking these secret financial arrangements. You can have secret financial arrangements if you're an unaccountable Supreme Court justice, right? Yeah, so there you go. But yeah, that also gets to the heart of what we were learning about Herschel Walker earlier. You can't be having secret financial arrangements. You can't. That was the purpose of the law. I mean, these are just facial attacks on the law at this point. Bennett said he was friendly with Thomas and declined to comment for the record about the specifics of Thomas's actions. But he said that when he was on the bench, Bennett, he wouldn't let his lawyer friends buy him lunch. Because they have cases in front of them? No, because they might one day have cases in front of them. And is it inappropriate? Was he going to change his mind about how to rule in a case because of lunch? Probably not. But what is he trying to avoid? The appearance of impropriety. That's a phrase, by the way, that's completely disappeared from ethical discussions. Well, was there a quid pro quo? Can you prove it? Was it in writing? Yeah, you're supposed to be avoiding the appearance of impropriety. Yeah, well, F that. Okay. The story continues. Thomas did not respond to questions. It makes it all the more remarkable that they were able to interview Martin for all of this. I don't know why he agreed to that. But anyway, in response to previous ProPublica reporting on gifts of luxury travel, he said, Thomas did at some point, that the Crows, quote, are among our dearest friends. Well, sure they are. And that he understood he didn't have to disclose the trips. Well, you understand incorrectly, sir. You do have to disclose the trips. ProPublica sent Crow a detailed list of questions, and his office responded with a statement that did not dispute the facts presented in the story. This is this word salad garbage. I mean, it's nice talk, and it's all you can say when you're caught dead to rights paying the tuition outright for a Supreme Court justice's relative. Harlan Crow has long been passionate about the importance of quality education and giving back to those less fortunate, like Supreme Court justices, especially at-risk youth, like those of Supreme Court justices, the statement said. I mean, can you imagine that's the defense? Well, education's important, isn't it? And I, as a billionaire, I feel I need to give back to people. Are you kidding? Give back to the less fortunate? You mean the Supreme Court justice that gets to vacation in mega yachts? How unfortunate. By the way, did the kid go with them on vacations? I'm curious about that. That's actually, my thinking is no. Not because, and it's not absolutely necessary, like in order to prove that you love this kid and we're going to raise them as a son, they have to also go on vacation with you. That's not necessarily the case. But it did strike me that it was like, it's interesting that you keep choosing boarding schools. You know, like to me, raising someone as a son means raising them as opposed to sending them to boarding school. But I understand that's supposed to be advantageous, and in their world, I guess it means something. Anyway, that's more of a judgment call. Harlan Crow has long been passionate about the importance of quality education and giving back to those less fortunate, especially at-risk youth and Supreme Court justices, the statement said. It's disappointing that those with partisan political interests would try to turn helping at-risk youth with tuition assistance into something nefarious or political. Well, the thing is, I'll agree that it's important to intervene with at-risk youth and give them a quality upbringing and education. But that's what Clarence Thomas said he was doing. I'm intervening on behalf of some relative such that my grandnephew will live with us and be raised as a son. I will see to his upbringing and education. By which I mean I will have someone else see to his upbringing and education. Specifically, my good billionaire friend who sends me on expensive vacations. And I'm not going to corrupt the kid and send him on expensive vacations. He goes to boarding school. I go on expensive vacations. What a great person I am. I mean, that's what's happened here, right? Unless the kid also went on vacations, in which case, I don't know. Then they're teaching him to be a corrupt bastard before he even reaches 18. But hey, parents' rights. Am I right? Okay. Anyway, so yeah, there we are. It's disappointing that those with partisan political interests would try to turn something dirty. The statement added that Crow and his wife have, quote, supported many young Americans. How many? Who are they? What are their names? At a variety of schools, including his alma mater, meaning Randolph-Macon Academy. Crow went to Randolph-Macon Academy. And so, you know, why not throw the kid in there too? Crow did not address a question about how much he paid in total for Martin's tuition. Asked if Thomas had requested the support for either school, Crow's office responded, no. I called and I said, listen, my friend is going to be upset about this, but I want to pay his bills. Let me do it. I mean, maybe, but I assume at some point Thomas noticed. I feel like we probably should have gotten a bill from Randolph-Macon Academy, but he probably didn't think so. Maybe for Hidden Hills he thought so, or Hidden Lake? But you know, it's hard to hide hills. Probably easier to hide a lake. I should have thought of that. Anyway, Maybe he should have thought about getting a tuition there, but if he didn't think it was weird that he wasn't getting a tuition bill from Randolph-Macon Academy, that was probably because he thought, well, Harlan Crow went to Randolph-Macon. Maybe he just told them, I need you to waive the tuition on this one. I mean, that's an in-kind contribution or in-kind bribe, essentially, but that might explain why he didn't see a bill. Last month, ProPublica reported that Thomas accepted luxury travel from Crow virtually every year for decades. That's a lot, including international super yacht cruises and private jet flights around the world. Crow also paid money to Thomas and his relatives in an undisclosed real estate deal. ProPublica found. After he purchased the house where Thomas's mother lives, Crow poured tens of thousands of dollars into improving the property, and roughly 15 years ago, Crow donated much of the budget of a political group founded by Thomas's wife, which paid her a $120,000 salary. Why didn't it pay her a $500,000 salary? Because what could she spend it on? All of her bills were being covered by Harlan Crow anyway. This is just money that's going to go into a bank somewhere, so what's the difference? Anyway, this is way outside the norm. This is way in excess of anything I've seen, said Richard Painter, former chief White House ethics lawyer for President George W. Bush, a Republican, referring to the cascade of gifts over the years. Painter said that when he was in the White House, an official who'd taken what Thomas had would have been fired. This amount of undisclosed gifts, you want to get them out of the government. Well, there's only a way to get him out of the government. Well, there's a couple ways. Okay, but there's only one where he involuntarily goes. Well, no, there's two that he involuntarily goes. One is death, natural or otherwise, just saying. And the other, of course, being impeachment. That's never going to happen. Or he chooses to retire. And why would he ever choose to retire, by the way? Because, I mean, if what it looks like this is going on, then the lifestyle ends. Well, yeah, and maybe for legal purposes and for legal protection, Harlan Crow takes him on one or two more trips at some point and says, see, we are great friends. After which, either we're not such great friends anymore or we're both getting a little elderly. We just don't do the super yacht thing anymore. So we decided to call a halt to that. Are we putting any of his great grandnephews through school? No. But that's between me and him. So, I mean, talk about your arrangement, right? We want Clarence Thomas to be appointed young so that he can be in the court forever. And when we say forever, we mean forever. We're going to give him such a great luxury package that he won't be able to afford to retire, which is weird because they're raking it in various other illegal payments and shady schemes. But when I say he won't be able to afford to retire, I mean he's gotten so many other gifts that there's just no way he could pay for all these things. All right. So as we were saying, this is, of course, the basic reason there are such rules. That's when we were talking about Herschel Walker, but this applies here too. In fact, after that comment from Richard Painter, this is a guy you want to get out of government. A federal law passed after Watergate requires justices and other officials to publicly report most gifts. Ordinarily, the thinking was if you had to put it all out in the open, you would be too embarrassed to do this. Which is true. He was too embarrassed to declare these things. But then once they were declared for them, he's just not embarrassed enough to resign, so he just won't. So I guess it turns out that it's all kind of toothless. Ethics law experts told ProPublica they believe Thomas was required by law to disclose the tuition payments because they appear to be a gift to him. It's not a gift to me, it's a gift to the kid. Who's he, right? Screw that guy. Justices must report many gifts to their spouses and dependent children. He's not my child. He's dependent, though. Oh, yeah, well, depends how you read the law. That's up to me, isn't it? The law's definition of a dependent child is narrow, however, and likely would not apply to Martin, since Thomas was his legal guardian, not his parent. But, I mean, if you're responsible for payments and then the payments disappear, come on. The best case for not disclosing Crow's tuition payment would be to argue the gifts were to Martin, not to Thomas, experts said. Yeah, well, then they should have been declared on someone's taxes and they weren't. So, But that argument was far-fetched anyway, experts said, because minor children rarely pay their own tuition. Typically, the legal guardian is responsible for the child's education. And remember that Harlan Crow is interested in helping the less fortunate. Well, if there's anybody less likely to be paying their own tuition than minor children, it would be less fortunate minor children. In fact, it would be virtually impossible for even a well-to-do minor child ordinarily to pay their own boarding school tuition. Never mind those less fortunate ones. But hey, maybe he really was extraordinarily fortunate after all. In which case, why are you looking over here? I don't know what that's supposed to mean. It's pretty stupid. The most reasonable interpretation of the statute is that this was a gift to Thomas and thus had to be reported. It's common sense, said Kathleen Clark, an ethics law expert at Washington University in St. Louis. It's all to the financial benefit of Clarence Thomas. But the great advantage that Thomas has in all of that is that he's one of 9 voices that could just say, that isn't what it means. It means something else. I don't know what, but not that. And then there's no appeal from that. Martin, now in his 30s, told ProPublica he was not aware that Crow paid his tuition. That doesn't surprise me. That could absolutely be the case, easily. But he defended Thomas and Crow, saying he believed there was no ulterior motive behind the real estate magnate's largesse over the decades. I think his intentions behind everything is just a friend and just a good person. Even if true, by the way, you might say, I understand your motive. I understand what you're trying to do here, but you are creating an enormous headache for me. I'm getting sick to my stomach having to hide all of your generosity. I'm just going to have to start disclosing this stuff. And who knows? Harlan might have been fine with that. But we don't know if they ever had their conversation because Clarence Thomas chose not to disclose any of it. And that's still a problem. If Harlan Crow's intentions behind everything were that he was just a friend and a good person, all okay. Not disclosing it, not okay. Does any of that fall on Harlan Crow? Maybe not. Does it all fall on Clarence Thomas? It sure does. Is anybody going to do anything about it? Nope. Crow has long been an influential figure in pro-business conservative politics. He's given millions of dollars to efforts to move the law and the judiciary to the right, and serves on the boards of think tanks that publish scholarship advancing conservative legal theories. Another thing that I was talking about with Greg there, right? This strictly in the legal world, but the same thing in writing the books and leading the Me Too movement. Maybe not as explicitly targeted with this idea in mind, but certainly once you find out that you're able to do this sort of thing, you say, well, great, not a bad thing at all. Let's educate people, including judges and prosecutors and jury pools, etc., that this is a new and viable theory and that everybody should think this. And then we can start convicting or holding people liable for rape and other crimes and torts that spring from them. All right. But anyway, we continue on. Crow has denied trying to influence the justice, but he has said that he extended hospitality to him just as he has to other dear friends. And I have yet to hear another of the names of these dear friends, by the way. But from the start, their relationship has intertwined expensive gifts and conservative politics. In a recent interview with the Dallas Morning News, Crow recounted how he first met Thomas. In 1996, the justice was scheduled to give a speech in Dallas for an anti-regulation think tank. Crow offered to fly him there on his private jet. During that flight, we found out we were kind of simpatico, the billionaire said. I mean, that doesn't really change much, but okay. The following year, the Thomases began to discuss taking custody of Martin. His father, Thomas's nephew, had been imprisoned in connection with a drug case. Thomas has written that Martin's situation held deep resonance for him because his own father was absent and his grandparents had taken him in under very similar circumstances. So far, so good. Makes some sense. Thomas had an adult son from a previous marriage, but he and wife Ginny didn't have any children of their own. They pitched Martin's parents on taking the boy in. Thomas explained that the boy would have the best of everything. his own room, a private school education, lots of extracurricular activities. Journalists Kevin Merida and Michael Fletcher reported in their biography of Thomas. Thomas gained legal custody of Martin and became his legal guardian around January of 1998, according to court records. Martin, who had been living in Georgia with his mother and siblings, moved to Virginia, where he lived with the justice from the ages of 6 to 19, he said. And I don't know how old the other siblings were and why they didn't move, and they probably have their own stories to tell about that. Living with the Thomases came with an unusual perk. Hey, and here's the answer to my earlier questions. The perk is lavish travel with Crow and his family. Martin told ProPublica that he and Thomas vacationed with the Crows at least once a year throughout his childhood. So that's good. I mean, I actually kind of prefer the story developing that way. I thought it would be kind of rude, but yeah, you know, if they went on these fabulous vacations and said, you spend spring break at your boarding school, it wouldn't surprise me, but it's nice that they brought him along. I would say that they exposed him to, cultural education on these trips, but he probably spent the whole time on a super yacht, and maybe not. I mean, it is a cultural education, just not the culture of wherever your super yacht is parked. The troubles that come with being a billionaire. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let me fill in a couple of gaps here with a couple other bits and pieces of information that have come my way along the way. One, when I mentioned Randolph-Macon Academy, I was thinking in the back of my head, I'm not 100% certain about this, but there's something about it that strikes me as, is it a military academy or not? I'm not 100% sure. And as it turns out, it's not a military academy per se, but in looking it up on Wikipedia during the break, and as you know, if it's on the internet, it has to be true. Randolph-Macon Academy is, well, first of all, co-ed, so there's at least that. Co-educational private boarding school with an elite Air Force Junior ROTC component. That's, I guess, why it, stuck in my head as a military academy. It's not strictly a military academy, but I guess there's a strong military component to it. Whether or not Martin participated in that, I am not sure. Maybe there's something about it in the story. But I guess, what if he did? If he did participate in it, that might be in his mind, well, that's how tuition got covered. I mean, because that happens too. So who knows what kind of story there. But I guess I would have said so in the interviews. And maybe he did, and we haven't gotten to that part yet. Speaking of reading this thing, though, we also got a message during the show that from our good friend Darwin, who says, hey, I was just wondering if you are covering this. I would like to read this story and discuss it for the show, and I was wondering if you were covering it, and it's this very story. So, yes, and of course my answer is yeah, but don't let that stop you, because I'd love to hear what Darwin has to say about this one. And it might even help you say, all right, if we covered the background and read the story, and you could just focus on the commentary, read the parts that you think are relevant and tell us what you're thinking about it. Well, that would keep the segment length under control, certainly, because I don't know how you're going to read this and comment. It's taken me all day long. But, frequently my contributors, our contributors, our friends are a lot briefer, because they have organized thoughts. And that's why it's so interesting to hear from them. But anyway, by all means, give me your take on this. And if it's the same, you just say, hey, I'm calling to confirm your priors. That's fine too. But I'll bet there's something additional in your thinking about it. By the way, also just in from friends and listeners and contributors is this. Where am I going for this? Mastodon. Okay, where our old Twitter pal, now Mastodon pal and listener Ballerina X, has this to add. Did you look it up? Did it ring a bell for you? Did you know already about this thing? There's more information on Hidden Lake Academy. It was one of those troubled teen residential schools meant to, and they're quoting somebody here, fill the gap between services of residential treatment centers and traditional boarding schools, according to Wikipedia, and also according to the, what am I looking at here? I don't know, Dahlonega Nugget. It looks like the word here, nugget, is in there. The URL is all smashed together. Dahlonega, I'm guessing at the pronunciation of that one. Dahlonega. I don't know what that is, where it is, but good find. I mean, did you just decide to look it up, or did you already know? I don't know, but maybe we'll get an answer to that one. The Dahlonega Nugget is, what the hell is it? Is there maybe an About Us thing? I don't know. It doesn't matter for the moment. I will tell you that we are referred here to a July 29th, 2019 piece entitled Filmmaker is Focusing on Hidden Lake Academy. Not sure why exactly, but I don't know. At the moment, okay, it's good to know that that's the case. It might be interesting to take a look at that. Dahlonega, is that like local to where Hidden Lake Academy actually is? Not sure. If it is, in fact, sort of a bridge between residential, let's say, rehabilitative treatment and boarding school, it wouldn't be surprising that a kid caught up in a situation like this could find himself in some sort of, at some sort of risk, let's say, that required intervention. And it doesn't really matter. What matters here is that there was the payment going on. It's what's going on as between the adults and what problems the kid may have faced at that time are just not relevant to the story itself. But it is interesting to know as background, and we might as well know all the facts, and then we won't all be shocked and dismayed if we find out later on that there were some problems hopefully overcome by the kid in question. But I think we can know that, understand it, grasp it, and leave it aside for the moment. I appreciate having the information, and we'll be as generous as we can with Martin himself in this situation at this moment, unless we find reason later on not to. Okay, so living with the Thomases came with that unusual perk and the answer to our question. He went on the trips too, and I think that's okay. I mean, it's no fault of his. I think it would have been, just on a personal level, horrible to leave him behind in all of this. And of course, there's no indication that the kid is ever going to be in a position. Here, it's harder to prove a quid pro quo. Maybe the kid will grow up to be a Supreme Court justice also, but, maybe not. So, not so far. Anyway, so these lavish travel plans also included, apparently, visits to Camp Top Ridge. That's Crow's private resort in the Adirondacks, and where the administrator from the private school, and I think this one was the Hidden Lake one, where he got to visit with Crow as well. So it included visits to there and 2 cruises on Crow's super yacht, Martin said, on a trip to the Caribbean, or do you prefer Caribbean? What's your favorite pronunciation? Martin recalled riding jet skis off the side of the billionaire's yacht. That'd be my memory too. As a teenager, that's a pretty cool memory, and good. Your life has improved dramatically. I'm still okay with anything you give to the kid. Just disclose this stuff. Roughly 20 years ago, Martin, Thomas, and the Crows went on a cruise on the yacht in Russia and the Baltics. Hold on a second. I'm just saying, 20 years ago, that's 2003. Russia hadn't gone completely bonkers ass crazy in terms of interfering in our politics, as far as we know, just yet. But, okay, I mean, it's an interesting place to go, I guess, for various reasons. Anyway, this all according to Martin and two other people familiar with the trip. The group toured St. Petersburg in a rented helicopter, and visited the Yusupov, I don't know how you pronounce it, palace, the site of Rasputin's murder, said one of the people. That's an interesting choice as well. They were joined by Chris Demuth, D-E-M-U-T-H, then the president of the conservative think tank, the American Enterprise Institute. Wowie wow. Thomas's trips with Crow to the Baltics and the Caribbean have not been previously reported. So that's new information on top of all the stuff they reported earlier. Thomas reconfigured his life to balance the demands of raising a child, sending him to boarding school, with serving on the high court. He began going to the Supreme Court before 6 a.m. so he could leave in time to pick up Martin after class. So that's nice. And help him with his homework. You mean after class at where? Was this before he went to boarding school? Or, I mean, Randolph-Macon Academy is in Front Royal? Is that what I read? Which is reachable from the Washington, D.C. area. Although, I mean, if you were I appreciate that you want to involve yourself in the kid's life. But one, it's a boarding school. So if you're picking them up after class from the boarding school, I don't know what exactly is going on. It's an hour from certain Virginia suburbs on a good day, an hour to Front Royal. But of course, if you're headed west on 66, not, the big Route 60, US 66, but I-66, to Front Royal, after class hours, I mean, it can be considerably longer. Did he drive? Did he go on a limb? I don't know when Thomas wants to get around, are we using court employees to go pick him up after school? I don't know. I don't know if that matters that much. It's interesting though. Anyway, so he began to go to the Supreme Court before 6 a.m. so he could leave in time to pick. I didn't realize they had such strict, time punch-in codes there at the place where, should I report this in as income? Should I report this gift? No. But I better get in before 6 or people are going to think I'm a shirker. Okay. I mean, you do have work to do. Anyway, he wanted to pick up Martin after class to help him with his homework, which is a weird thing about boarding schools. Home is there, but I guess earlier on, maybe he isn't at boarding school yet. Remember, he took custody of him at 6 and he didn't ship him off to boarding school immediately, presumably. By 2001, the justice had moved Martin to private school out of frustration with the Fairfax County Public School System's lax schedule. The American Lawyer magazine reported. The lax schedule. I mean, the schedule's the same as anybody else's. But I can't be picking him up at 3 in the afternoon, as the case with elementary school kids, and doing his homework with them. I need to put him in. Now, that's why the choice for boarding school, maybe. Let's let somebody else help him with his homework. And in fact, let's make someplace else his home. For high school, Thomas sent Martin to Randolph-Macon Academy. They describe it as a military boarding school. So there you go. 75 miles west of Washington, D.C., where he was in the class of 2010. The school, which sits on a 135-acre campus in the Shenandoah Valley, charged between $25,000 and $30,000 a year. Martin played football and basketball, and the justice sometimes visited for games. So he wasn't picking him up from Randolph-Macon Academy for his homework. It was when he was in Fairfax County schools, and yada yada, and a little plug for bashing public education. Martin sometimes chafed at the strictures of military school, according to people at Randolph-Macon at the time, and he spent his junior year at Hidden Lake Academy, a therapeutic boarding school in Georgia, it says. Hidden Lake boasted one teacher for every 10 students, and activities ranging from horseback riding to canoeing. Those services came at an added cost. At the time, tuition was roughly $73,000 plus fees. Wow. Okay. That's quite a bit. The July 2009 bank statement from Hidden Lake was filed in a bankruptcy case for the school. Wow. Which later went under. The document shows that Crow Holdings LLC wired $6,200 to the school that month, the exact cost of the month's tuition, so don't try to claim it's for anything else. The wire is marked Mark Martin in the ledger, so that makes it tough as well. Crow's office said in its statement that Crow's funding of students' tuition has, quote, always been paid solely from personal funds, sometimes held at and paid through the family business. So, yeah, all money being fungible, who cares, right? I mean, okay, it's always personal. It just happens to be coming from corporate accounts, but it's totally personal nonetheless. I don't really know what that's supposed to mean, except they're hoping people will say, I don't understand how that could possibly be true, but he says it is, so I guess we have to leave it at that. Grimwood, the administrator at Hidden Lake, told ProPublica that Crow wired the school money once a month to pay Martin's tuition fees. Grimwood had multiple roles on the campus, including overseeing an affiliated wilderness program. He said he was speaking about the payments because he felt the public should know about outside financial support for Supreme Court justices. He's right. Martin returned to Randolph-Macon his senior year. So good for him. He was feeling better. Everything was cool. And he got his life back on track. That's nice. I was wondering why Crow paid monthly, by the way. Couldn't he just pay for the whole year up front? Or maybe it was unclear how long he would be at Hidden Lake. I don't know. Anyway, Thomas has long been one of the less wealthy members of the Supreme Court. Still, when Martin was in high school, he and Ginny Thomas had income that put them comfortably in the top echelon of Americans. In 2006, for example, the Thomases brought in more than $500,000 in income, and they have no kids, just pointing that out. The following year, they made more than $850,000 from Clarence Thomas's salary from the court, Ginny Thomas's pay from the Heritage Foundation, and book payments for the justice's memoirs. It appeared that at some point in Martin's childhood, Thomas was paying for private school himself. Ah, that's good. Martin told ProPublica that Thomas sold his Corvette, his most prized car, to pay for a year of tuition, although he didn't remember when that occurred. In 2002, a friend of Thomas's from the RV community who owned a Florida pest control company, wow, that's very blue-collar of you, Earl Dixon, offered Thomas $5,000 to help defray the costs of Martin's education. Thomas's disclosure of that earlier gift, several experts said, could be viewed as evidence that the justice himself understood he was required to report tuition aid from friends. At first, Thomas was worried about the propriety of the donation. Thomas biographers Merida and Fletcher recounted he agreed to accept it if the contribution was deposited directly into a special trust for Mark. In his annual filing, Thomas reported the money as an education gift to Mark Martin. Is that the end of today's? And so I bet that sounds like there's going to be more coming, but I guess that's the end of it. And just as well, as I really wanted to kind of get off of this topic for a little while, I'll bet there'll be some more. If there are further installments, maybe, Darwin, maybe we want to work out, you want to read the other ones, or it's okay to read this one again too and talk about it. There's a million different good takes out there. Mine, might not even have been one of them. So I'd be very happy to have yours. Plus, always nice for, us to be able to, relax and, let someone else do the driving for a little while. Okay. Let's see. Other stories. I mentioned to you that there was news from the legal world, and I contradicted a point that Greg was making with this news. So now I kind of feel like I have to prove that it's the case. And I also see that my brother Mark has sent this story on too via email. He's using AP's report on that. And we might go there, especially if I've already run into a paywall with the Daily Beast, and I think I have. But I had a story about it from the Daily Beast from Lachlan Cartwright. Well, he's sort of got a developing story short blurb about it. So maybe we go over to the AP. I know it'll be a little drier than reading about it at the Daily Beast, but what the hell? At least they'll probably have a full article on it. Trump lawsuit against New York Times over 2018 series Tossed, says the AP. Did they give anybody in particular byline credit for this one? Apparently not. Okay. And they have a short blurb, too. So maybe we read both, if this is not particularly revealing. Former President Donald Trump's lawsuit against the New York Times over a 2018 investigative series into his family's wealth and tax practices was dismissed by a state judge on Wednesday. The lawsuit accused the Times and 3 of its investigative reporters of relentlessly seeking out his estranged niece, Mary Trump. Relentlessly seeking her out. Mary, would you like to talk? Yes. Relentless. As a source of information and convincing her to turn over confidential documents. The $100 million suit, of course, why not, claims the reporters were aware of a settlement agreement barring her from disclosing the documents. Trump sued Mary Trump, the Times, and the 3 reporters in 2021. My point was only that he does, in fact, sometimes follow up and actually sue people. It's dumb. He shouldn't. He loses, but he does do it from time to time, but not with the rape victims for some reason. Anyway, the Times and its reporters on Wednesday succeeded in getting a judge to dismiss the claims against them. Trump had claimed that they were, quote, motivated by a personal vendetta against him. Sure. As opposed to, you're a horrible person and we've accidentally put you in charge of the country and people need to know exactly how horrible you are. And even if you weren't horrible, you're a public figure. We're supposed to know what you're up to and where your money comes from. Anyway, plaintiffs' claims against the Times defendants as initial matter fail as a matter of constitutional law, Robert Reed of the New York State Supreme Court wrote. And remember, in New York, the Supreme Court isn't the Supreme Court like it is in the federal system. It's the actual trial level courts, are confusingly called the Supreme Court. He said that legal news gathering is, quote, at the very core of protected First Amendment activity. And it actually is. Reed also ordered Trump to pay legal expenses for the newspaper and its reporters, Suzanne Craig, David Barstow, and Russ Butner. Trump attorney Alina Habba said, we will weigh our clients' options. I mean, you'll weigh them. They just don't weigh anything. All journalists must be held accountable when they commit civil wrongs. The New York Times is no different, and its reporters went well beyond the conventional news gathering techniques permitted by the First Amendment, she said in an email. The thing is, she's paid to say that, and the person who's paid to decide whether or not she's right says, no, the F she isn't. I just dismissed these things. You're saying the opposite doesn't make the opposite true. You have the option to appeal, but everyone else is likely going to say, you're dumb, or you're just trying to bill your client. And, that might be true too. Maybe she's not dumb. She's just looking to make money. The Times' reporting challenged Trump's claims of self-made wealth, which is always ridiculous, by documenting how his father, Fred, had given him at least $413 million over the decades, including through tax avoidance schemes. The series was awarded a Pulitzer Prize in explanatory reporting. So there you have that. That's good news. Also news on the legal front. Greg is on the case and sending us this information, including, in its totality, is the tweet of Kyle Cheney, who watches these things as he watches everything. And he says, happening now, verdict expected in Proud Boys trial momentarily. Lawyers and defendants entering the courtroom now. Of course, I don't know. It depends on what they sent out with their note. Could be more questions. But anyway, today is the 6th day of deliberation. The most significant question, of course, Kyle continues, is whether the jury finds the 5 defendants, Enrique Tarrio, Ethan Nordine, Joe Biggs, Zach Reel, and Dominic Pizzola, guilty of seditious conspiracy. However, there are other felony charges on the lists: conspiracy to obstruct Congress, conspiracy to impede federal officers, actual obstruction, and 2 assaults. Now everyone is in the room. Judge Kelly's on the bench. This was 15 minutes ago already, so we might actually have some news. Kelly now discussing with the lawyers what to do after accepting the partial verdict. DOJ urging Kelly to send jurors back to keep deliberating on non-unanimous counts. That's what happens. Biggs attorney Norm Pattis and Rail attorney Carmen Hernandez are urging the judge to decline to take a partial verdict until the jury has explicitly said they've deadlocked on unresolved counts, but the judge has already told them it would be okay to send it to them. Kelly will take the partial verdict, however, and tell the jury it may continue deliberating on the remaining counts, so it should be coming momentarily. Defendants are split. Now is the latest news. Real, Nordine, and Tarrio want the jury polled after their partial verdict. Pezzola and Biggs oppose polling the jury before all counts are resolved. Jury coming in now. So we'll probably be wrapping things up on here before the news is reported. So, I don't know. But you should instead stay tuned and listen to Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Let him talk to you about all the other things going on in the world, and then come out to the pleasant news. So the jury is not left the jury room yet. There's still food and snacks in there. And they'll drag this thing out until another Friday. But Friday is a very popular day for juries to wrap up their work. But if they have more deliberations to do, look for it next Friday instead. Okay. Was there anything from the Daily Beast's reporting about the throwing out of these New York Times and Mary Trump cases that was additional? I think so. Let me sort of thumb through it. And all right, well, let's see. The New York Times statement. The New York Times is pleased with the judge's decision today. It is an important precedent reaffirming that the press is protected when it engages in routine news gathering to obtain information of vital importance to the public. Very true. The judge, of course, saying this is all at the very core of protected First Amendment activity, et cetera, et cetera. So the only thing that added here was the New York Times' statement. But, all right, important news and definitely part of the overall picture that you should get from the legal standing of all these things happening at once. All right, other things to add. Let's add something that Scott sent along the way. Total departure from everything, because we can't, finish a theme in the few minutes that we have left. But the theme here will be brazenness, because the word brazen has come up already today. Here's something else brazen. A brazen attack on Ohioans' 111-year-old voting rights draws deserved rebuke from ex-governors. This according to an editorial piece in, where are we? Cleveland.com. So it's from the Cleveland Plain Dealer. And here's something that hadn't been on the radar up to this point, but part of an overarching theme of what Republicans are doing. Every time, basically, people speak out and use the tools that they have to say, we disagree with this direction and want to go in that direction. And that means we actually are, at the moment, in disagreement with the Republican Party. And whether or not we're in agreement with the Democratic Party remains to be seen. But we don't like what you're doing. Republicans say, we should remove your ability to say so. And here's another example of it. In one of the most shameless power grabs in Ohio history, and boy, have there been some shameless power grabs in Ohio's history, State House Republicans, evidently including Governor Mike DeWine, the good guy who cried about all that stuff one time, remember him, are aiming to make it harder for Ohio voters to amend the state's constitution. Because really, why should the people have any say in their governing documents, right? Object to derail an amendment to be proposed by voter petition that would guarantee the right of women to seek an abortion in Ohio. Of course, we've heard all the news that any time you actually put it to a vote, even in extremely conservative states, it turns out abortion access is extremely popular and those measures win. And surprisingly so. Or by which I mean the right to an abortion seems to win. So someone said, let's do it in Ohio. And they were likely going to win there too. So Republicans say, let's make it illegal to do that from now on. Even worse, GOP legislative leaders seek to force their proposed constitutional change. They want a new one. Here's the change. Ready? Requiring a 60% margin to ratify, compared to the simple majority in effect since 1912, and doubly difficult signature gathering requirements to even get a citizen initiative on the ballot. And to do all of that and to graft that onto a traditionally low turnout August election, by the way, that would be the same kind of August election they recently abolished as too expensive and unrepresentative. So they got rid of the August low turnout August elections because they were losing them, but they figured they might be able to maybe we'll do just one more and make it about abortion. And then if our people turn out and theirs don't, we can win this thing and we can change the process by which the Constitution of Ohio can get amended. We're going to make more 60% threshold supermajorities that don't belong anywhere in our government than just the United States Senate. So last year's August 2nd special election, by the way, had an 8% voter turnout. The November election drew more than 52% of Ohio voters. Dang, and I accidentally clicked on something. Now, no wonder that powerful precedents in law and practice have previously combined to put major constitutional changes before Ohio voters in the fall when elections draw the most voters. And this would be a consequential change, impacting Ohioans' long-standing rights to propose and pass constitutional amendments as a break against legislative corruption. Yet, as with so much associated with this GOP legislative push to restrain Ohioans' long-standing rights, past precedents don't matter. The voters' will doesn't matter. And a law passed just months ago doesn't matter. And remember, didn't we recently find out that the Supreme Court only cares about recently passed laws? Oh, well, they don't matter either. I'm way behind, but I wanted to read you the rest of this thing. Even Governor DeWine, serving in what is likely his last term in office after a distinguished political career and whose veto pen could derail this effort to silence the people via a low turnout August 8th election, no less, shamefully has said that he will not do so. He pledged this week to sign the special election legislation overriding a law eliminating such elections, except for fiscal emergencies, that took effect only 21 days ago. The legislature's current bid to crimp Ohio voters' rights is so outrageous that 4 former governors, Republicans Bob Taft and John Kasich, and Democrats Richard Celeste and Ted Strickland, have all condemned it. Why the 60% margin? Lawmakers assess, likely correctly, that a majority of Ohioans would ratify a reproductive rights amendment by a simple majority if given the opportunity to do so in November, but in states whose voters have constitutionally protected abortion, the range of yes votes for those rights has often been less than 60%. Notably, these state house proposals target citizen-initiated constitutional amendments with new signature-gathering requirements that could double the difficulty and cost of getting such amendments on the ballot. The required percentage of signatures that must be gathered in all 88 counties rather than 44 now, and a 10-day cure period to fix any signature shortfalls would be eliminated. Wow.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
How did it happen? Well, the state Senate is run 26-7 by Republicans, and of course they've already passed this new threshold. The measure, Senate Joint Resolution 2, and a companion bill to reinstate an August election, Senate Bill 92, are pending in the Ohio House. We'll talk more about it perhaps later this week. Stay tuned now for Justice Putnam next.